get some ideas from the group. Basically, it's NYCDataWeb, and we look at it as a pragmatic approach to creating an open data exchange in New York City. And from last year, I tend to, you saw it. I always have this Indiana Jones thing, a little detour before I talk about NYCDataWeb, about how I got started with SMWC. Oops, I forgot to, before I start, there's some sound effects actually. Well, you missed the Indiana Jones thing, that's okay. Everyone knows that. So about me, I'm just a practitioner, I'm no PhD, blah, blah, blah guy. Basically, I got exposed to SMW just by Googling and happening upon it about sometime early 2008. And I tried something, and 2 months later, I had a functional prototype. And since then, I got the bug, and I've been doing SMW ever since. And I guess I'm one of the few guys who's been to all the meetings, without exception. And since then, I've managed to convince my boss, before I used to look after emerging technologies at the small consulting company we have, I convinced them to fund the knowledge engineering practice. So let's go back again to the first SMW Plus user meeting. It was from 22nd to the 23rd, some familiar faces in there. On the second day, there were about 10 people who stayed back. And I was the one taking the picture, but they had a brainstorming session where they have this whiteboard that I shared this last year. And they basically just did a brain dump of what they wanted to do with SMW, right? So we can see here workflow, access control, exporting data, things like groups, doing, again, workflow. And then they were talking about the meetings too. Maybe we should do this twice a year. Shift between Asia and Europe or something like that. And sure enough, that was what happened. And the next meetup was March 09. This was back then a meetup, and there were only like 10 people who attended. I didn't know that. I was so excited. I said, oh, you know what? I had a meeting the day before. So and I have to be there in San Francisco, the other side of the country. So I took a plane like 4 o'clock in the morning, got there in time for the meeting and took a plane back because I have another meeting the same day, the next day. But it was still exciting. And then Mark saw me there. And as I was leaving with Marco Newman, I don't know if you know Marco, he's the meetup guy, right? Mark signaled to me, Joel, you're going to Semtech, you're speaking at Semtech. I said, oh, okay. So that was March 09, and sure enough, I got really excited. I told my boss, let's create a team. So that's the C team that we pulled together to do semantics, and they basically started doing things, learning on their own. And Semtech came around, and Mark had the semantic wiki track, and he managed to squeeze me in. Everybody had like 10 minutes. That was Denny, and Mark's back. And here I am talking about, this practice that we started. Back then we called it our semantics practice, before we decided to change it to knowledge engineering. And during Semtech, as luck would have it, we bumped into this major pharma. I'm not at liberty to disclose. Sat next to somebody during lunch, and they started asking, oh, what do you do in semantics, and blah, blah, blah. They saw the speaker badge. They said, oh, maybe you can do some work for us, because we want to use semantic wikis. So we contacted Enterprise. Hey, there's this big pharma here that wants to do work. Maybe we can team up. And we did a partnership with Enterprise, right? And we partnered us with another early adopter. I'm not at liberty to disclose once again. And we started working on we bumped into them in June. We had the contract signed around early July. That was that fast. So we were the prime contractor. I was so excited. And then we said, we didn't know what the requirement was. what we knew was they wanted to build basically in the formal R&D being the kind of knowledge that they're trying to, like the digital Aristotle, but in the formal R&D space, they had all these loose knowledge and they wanted to organize it. And it was just perfect for the semantic wiki. But then they had all these structured knowledge in their LIMS databases, in their measurements databases that they wanted to mash up with the unstructured data. So we asked Enterprise, how do we do that? Well, the triple store connector. Okay, let's do the triple store connector. But then Jürgen is this founder and CEO of Enterprise, said, you know what, that's not scheduled to be released until next spring. But let's try doing it anyway. So by the time we were doing this, we were doing the implementation when this came around. This was around, I think, November of 2009 in Karlsruhe. We hit some hiccups in the triple store connector. So we ended up not using it. We ended up using just BERT, which is, if you're familiar with BERT, it's the business intelligence reporting tool, open source for Java, to do the expose the data. Hopefully we can get back to it, I think.
But now it works.
Now it works.
Believe us.
So that was then. Around the same time frame, another big company contacted Enterprise. This time around, they're in the space of healthcare R&D. And I'm not at liberty to disclose, they're one of the big guys that do R&D in healthcare and how to manage all these clinical knowledge. And once again, if you're familiar with the space, one book that I would highly encourage you is, there's this clinical decision support book. It's the #1 book that you see out there. And basically all the guys get semantics. They know semantics is the only way to deal with clinical knowledge. So they're very excited. We started working on workflow. If you recall, when I was presenting in Karlsruhe, I was saying, hey, this workflow thing we need to solve. Oh, no, I think I did it in Amsterdam, right? Yeah. So let me jump to Amsterdam. So we did this in SMW+. Oh, before then, I went back to, as a result of our experience with that pharma, I said, okay, we need to have proper training. So we flew Hans Stross to India, and he was there for a week training our guys in Calcutta and Mumbai, okay, so we can have formal training. And now we can attack the next problem. So we're attacking the next problem in Amsterdam. The key worry there was workflow. Workflow is not ready. We don't have workflow. That's why, if you recall my presentation last year, saying, what do we do about workflow? So we came up with some kludgy stuff. A sad story is it was too kludgy. And I'm glad that seeing the roadmap right now, that there might be scope for us to revisit that account. I know Enterprise is still in that account, so I think we can still revisit them because they have certain deadlines with the Healthcare Reform Act that they have to have certain things in place by 2012, so they cannot wait. Okay? And now we are here in Arlington, the latest one. And appropriate enough, we're by the Iwo Jima Memorial. I don't know if everybody's familiar with that. It's this tremendous battle in the island of Iwo Jima, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm in that tremendous battle of my crusade. And I want to raise the SMW flag. But we'll get there. So 2 years, 5 months, and 7 days later since the first user group meeting, which interestingly enough is 888 days.
Is it true?
Yeah. By the diamond date calculator, I think the community continues to do very well. We have all these things that we had on that blackboard and that whiteboard, and so much more, as Marcus just said with us. Sorry. So I don't need to tell you how much investment Mark and Vulcan and everybody else is investing into this platform. And from last year, I was even asking about where was workflow. That was Dutch. I was trying to localize my talk. And I said, because clients require workflow, and sure enough, even Aaron was talking about their developments there in that workflow space. And then once again, Enterprise. Yeah, I had to use this because there's some background here. So when I went to India, I had to do a little dog and pony show with a board, right? They said, "Show me the money. Where's the money in this thing?" Right? So I said, we'll get there. We'll get there. We're on the ground floor, and I showed them this poster. I don't know if you're familiar with this poster. This is from Davis Mills. He's the 10X guy, Project 10X. This big guy, very gung-ho, business opportunity, billions of dollars here in this space, right? And he came out with this poster, and here are all the things that semantics will enable, all these areas of opportunities that you can do work on, right? So, wow, and I showed this to the board, and they were so excited. Okay, continue. And then we decided to rebrand the practice. We now call it the Knowledge Engineering Practice, and they gave me another team in Kolkata. So yeah, we have more people now. So sometimes though, when I think of a poster, I think of this, another poster. Maybe I'm being too much on the bleeding edge, right? And the curiosity killed the cat, like they say. Or in this case, a penguin. And maybe the kind of poster that people are thinking of too is, I am the guy who gets shot down first, the early adopter sometimes. You don't want to be too bleeding edge, right? But I'm hopeful, and thankfully I have some keynote skills, right? So I can at least do my dog and pony with the board, and they'll, okay, keep continuing. So, my special effects budget is good enough. But, I'm staying at the Best Western Iwo Jima. So last night I was preparing this presentation. And, I noticed, okay, I was doing those posters thing. There's a poster behind me. So it said, fortitude, strength to persist, the courage to endure. I promise you, I'll tell you about SMW quickly. I'm about finished. So I'm going to endure and keep pushing on this SMW thing. I think with the roadmap that Dr. Greaves has shown us, I'm sure we're just around the corner now. So one thing, before we start that, bear with me too, here's just a 2-minute clip. I don't know if everybody's familiar with This American Life. I'm an NPR junkie, so there's this radio show every week. It has like 500 episodes now. And this Ira Glass guy, he's my idol. I go to their tapings when they have live tapings in New York. And he had this interview, and he was saying something, it struck me, even though he was saying it in the context of doing the American Life, what he says, listen to it closely, applies to us. It's just about 2 minutes.
Nobody tells people who are beginners, and I really wish somebody had told this to me, is that if you're watching this video, somebody wants to make videos, right? And all of us who do creative work, like, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. Do you know what I mean? Like, you want to make TV because you love TV. You know what I mean? Because there's stuff that you just, love, okay? So you've got really good taste. And you get into this thing that I don't even know how to describe, but it's like there's a gap. That for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. It's really not that great. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, your taste is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? Like, you can tell that it's still sort of crappy. A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I would just say to you with all my heart is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste. They could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it felt short. And some of us could admit that to ourselves, and some of us are a little less able to admit that to ourselves. But we knew it didn't have this special thing that we wanted it to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, if you're going through it right now, if you're just getting out of that phase, if you're just starting off and you're entering into that phase, you got to know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you could do is do a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month you know you're going to finish one story. You know what I mean? Whatever it's going to be. Like, you create the deadline. It's best if you have somebody who's waiting for work for you, somebody who's expecting it from you, even if it's not somebody who pays you, but that you're in a situation where you have to turn out the work. It's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions.
Yeah, so that's my inspiration. Like when I heard that, I think he's speaking to me like it's an Oprah moment. So I just stumbled onto that like last week. So I have to use this. So anyway, like I have some lessons learned too, being a practitioner and trying to do it and forge ahead. Some very hard lessons and have the wounds to show for it is solutions, not technology. That's why we changed our practice from semantics to knowledge engineering, because what we were asking, that antivirus, security. No, so it's solutions that we have to think about. And if you follow the Ontolog forum, they came out with this communique. I highly encourage you to read it last week. They came out with this. And it validated my belief too that, it's, oftentimes when we pitch at the corporation, enterprise level, they don't know what the semantics thing is. So we have to focus on what we bring to the table, right? And it's how we solve their problems. Second of all, start small. I think that was echoed too in some of the presentations. Don't try to take on too much. I think we made that mistake with the pharma. Complexity is the enemy of adoption too. Don't make it too complex, and you have to, for people who are not into this space, you talk about triples and all these things, and they start blanking out. So just again, focus on the solution, and also set your expectations properly. Especially now that Watson just screamed these two guys, and I say, I want something like that. It's not going to happen. Right? Welcome our new world. So that's not going to happen. Not yet. Invest in training. Invest in training. So we have trained our people, and there's also training by not formal training like what we did, but also by going to this fora and connect with the right people. And I think we managed to connect to the right people here. And we have other partners. Found a partner of ours, Revalytics, and we put together something. They put together this data mine, nothing similar to data.gov. It's basically just a website where they have like 400 data sets, some CSV, some Access databases, some Excel files, some text files. And this was all inspired by this app for democracy thing that Vivek Kundra did while he was still the CTO here in Washington, D.C. before he was elevated by Obama. And they have something similar. They have the data catalog. So Bloomberg said, I want to do that too. So, the second iteration, the first time it happened last year, it caught my eye and I said, next time they do it again, I want to participate. So October, they announced Big Apps 2. They had a kickoff meeting the following month. Then I started speaking to Revalytics. Mark introduced us to Greg and Mike Lang during 2009. And they said they want to collaborate with us too. So I said, okay, let's try to do something. So we started work on this NYCDataWeb, and we just had like 5 weeks to do it. So we submitted it like 30 minutes before deadline. And
Introducing the New York City DataWeb.
The New York City data mine has taken an enormous step forward in terms of making public data available to citizens. The New York City DataWeb takes another step forward by making the data easier to use, enabling powerful cross-dataset analytics to be done simply. For this project, we used open-source dashboard widgets to build sophisticated analytics. The key, though, is to deal with the data.
There are over 350 datasets in the NYC data mine. The datasets are in a wide variety of incompatible formats, and every dataset has its own schema. The terminology used in the schemas is not defined anywhere, and there's no alignment of terminology across schema. These issues make it extremely difficult to do analysis across datasets. This creates immense difficulties for application developers, and is also a problem for the City of New York itself, as it means there are a lot of analytics being missed out on. The solution lies with a new information management paradigm known as semantic technology. which provides a common data model and data access paradigm. The key components of this technology are 3 standards published by the World Wide Web Consortium, known as the Resource Description Framework called RDF, the Ontology Web Language called OWL, and a query language called Sparkle. By providing a single mechanism for data access and describing the semantics of the data, the NYCDataWeb makes it simple to do analysis across data sets.
Using OWL, we have developed some particular ontologies that are part of the NYCDataWeb. The NYC...
I can skip that, you know that part. Right? So basically, they're using their tool set. They're coming out with their own Sparkle endpoint and data federation engine. And, you know, the thinking is SMW doesn't care, right? So long as it's a Sparkle endpoint, I can get something. So where's SMW? Like I just clued you in, it's 2 dashboards we built. One is we call NYC creation. And basically what we did there is we abused the data import extension and made it query a Sparkle endpoint. And it was good enough for our exercise, but since their server was still in beta and it was not released yet, it was causing some problems, but you know, it was working. And then not only to visualize the Sparkle query from all that federated data, we also figured, hey, let all these data sets, there are about 350 data sets, there's no metadata. Maybe we can create something and manage the metadata as well. So we had created another SMW Plus dashboard to explore the data mine itself. And hopefully in the phase 2, you'll see what we plan to do. So here's your token dashboard visualization thing. Parts of it are done with, it's SMW Plus, you can see from the skin. But since we were having problems with, even with the caching of the data import extension, we were having problems with, because they only hosted one small Amazon EC2 machine, Rebeletix. So we were overrunning it every time we cheated a bit when we submitted, because you'll see some of the ask queries doesn't look like your typical ask result, the query results. We hard-coded it. because people were hitting us, and we said, you know what, it works, but we just hard-coded it, but you know, little cheated there.
That's just a scaling issue.
A scaling issue. Yeah, and because it was free, we didn't want to invest, and Rebeletix didn't want to invest, that's why we decided to do that. But you know, the OFC there, for the visualization, that works.
You should have come to us.
Yeah. And the Data Mine Explorer is NY Semantics. In this one, we decided to break it up in 2 parts, because what I tried to do is talking about training and investing in your team. I made it a competition of sorts between my 2 teams. Okay, Calcutta team do this, Mumbai team do this. See who does better. I had my own mini big apps challenge in the organization. And the Mumbai team came up with what I shouldn't say. was a more elaborate implementation. They had more time, of course. And they were doing all these kinds of visualizations that are typical OFC. Ning and Jesse, you should know. But apart from that, if you look here, so here we're just exploring the data itself. So if I click on search eateries, if I click on that thing, I get the exhibit result format, and then they can search search about the eateries. And also, if I click on, say, one eatery there, I go to this screen, and then I keep drilling down. I click on food cart. I get to this screen. So we really leverage all the asking about the data set that we loaded into SMW Plus. And so on it goes, your classical drill down, right? And you can see all the facts in there stored as semantic properties in the wiki. So that's for the data itself, and then for the metadata, we also had the Explorer for the metadata. So here it's showing one data set. We can show me all CSV files, show me all KML files, for what's for the Bronx, what's for all these guys. what agency published that data set. So we put that on to SMW Plus as well. And again, the drill down and everything is asserted there in that image. So March 31, we submitted. About a month and a half later, we got a call a week before Big Apps. They said, "Oh, come to the Big Apps ceremony. You submitted, so you should just attend." So we attended, myself, Greg Milbank, Mike Lang Jr., and Michelle, the two psychologists there. And we didn't know, we won. There's Bloomberg right there. I didn't know he was so small. But
Incredible.
yeah, I mean, well, it wasn't that big a field. Basically, they had this special award called the Large Organization Award, which we found kind of strange because we're not that large. But I guess because we were a collaboration of companies. But we did win against Accenture. Accenture submitted something, so that's good still. I don't know who the other big organizations are. There were a total of about 80 submissions, I think. And they had all kinds of prizes, and they had this special prize they launched just this year, the Large Organization Award. So what we want to do now is leverage this recognition from from New York City. We have that door open, right? And Bloomberg gets data. He's a data geek. So we're trying to go to what's next with NYCDataWeb. You know, we want to do something with NYCDataWeb. Now that I have this momentum, I showed this award, you know, to my boss. You know, I invested all this, and all I get is a certificate. So kind of look at me, but okay, you know, I'll convert this. So phase 2, we'll integrate NYC creation and NY semantics, make it one and the same. And we'll do the whole data mine. We only did a subset of the data mine for phase 2. Make it easier for publishers. Last year, there's this council member, Brewer, who proposed open data for New York. Around June of last year, everybody was pushing for it, sadly, because the Department of Information Technology made an estimate it's going to cost $500 million to publish everything as open data. That was their estimate, so it was tabled. They didn't move forward with it. So maybe we'll come, now that we have this recognition, you know, we have penciled an appointment next month to see them. We can show them we can do it much cheaper, not $500 million. So your agency can be easier to publish. You know, you don't need to learn RDF. We'll convert your CSV files, your text files, your XML files. And also, we want to see the ground for the developers. Because Big Apps is really targeted at developers. You know, it's funded by, the challenge is funded by the New York Economic Development Council. Basically, they want to juice up Silicon Alley. So that's why we're thinking we should target the developers too, and maybe this is a way to spread adoption of SMW. And lastly, of course, the citizens, right? Have this citizen mashup. You know, they go to a site and they can mash up things on their own. And if you follow the open data space, Socrates is a big name, right? Basically, they're cloud-hosted startup. They do cloud hosting of open data, but they don't do federation. And you know, it's just basically a way to publish data quickly and explore, slice and dice. And data.gov. The thing with data.gov, and there's some use of data.gov that some people know, has been defunded. It's a shame because it's a real valuable resource, but the thing with data.gov that I found difficult when I tried to use it as a data source is I think it's targeted towards researchers. It's not, you know, like somebody who gets Web 3.0, Web 2.0 guy, JSON and all that, they don't get, okay, it does do JSON, but how do I mash it up, do federation? And, you know, they don't want to learn Sparkle. So maybe we'll incorporate the best of both worlds and use SMW Plus as a way to do accelerated data mashup. As a platform that they can install the developers and do things immediately. And next year, our ambition too for Big Apps 3.0 is typically they only have 3 months for the challenge, right? In our experience, we spent about half of that time just making sense of the data. If we expose this and say, powered by NYCDataWeb, they can be productive from day one. So they'll have more time to innovate during the challenge. So that's what our ambition is. Hopefully we get it next month. And if we do make it past phase 2, what we have in mind is we have an open source collaboration with Rebalytics. More details to be announced in December. Just along the lines of their Sparkle endpoint. And we want to templatize DataWeb, so all these other cities that have this open data initiatives, hopefully can just drop it in, right? And hopefully we want to create a bundle that will publish in the deployment framework, so people can just try it out and make it easier and easier still for all the target audience to do this and really have widespread adoption. And we can do all this even with my small team, and thanks to you guys, we can stand on the shoulders of these giants, all the work that we've managed to do. And just a little thing before we leave, just something that I want to share before I take questions.
The healthiest democracies flourish when the way government works is open and transparent. Data.gov is a platform that's going to democratize data that taxpayers have already paid for.
This is happening in small and quiet but fairly significant ways across the entire federal government.
In fact, affirmatively wanted to share this information, to make it available for free for download by the American public.
The individual American is going to know where earmarks go, who got the money.
Shifting of responsibility to government to provide this information is absolutely a measure of success. And then secondly, citizen use of this information.
We actually saved, as a result of the IT dashboard and its detailed reviews, $3 billion.
Yeah, so I don't know if you follow the news on open data. So the last round of budget negotiations, this got the axe. Well, the funding went from $34 billion per year to $2 million. So they'll turn off the lights for data.gov, I think, later next month. And then by July, they'll turn off the lights on IT dashboard too. So there's a push to save the data. So hopefully spread the word, and maybe that we don't lose that resource. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, it's not really semantic wiki. It's basically their modeling environment. It's cloud-based. It's not really a wiki per se. I think it has a wiki engine, but it's not the same space as semantic wiki. Actually, they're quite keen, Mike Lang and Greg are quite keen to use SMW as their application mashup. So there's two different things.
You said there were many different data sources that you assessed. How did you lift them to the Sparkle language?
Well, basically that's where we use, Rebalytics came up with their own engine. So they have, I don't know if you saw snippets of it, they have this thing called the Spider, which basically you pump all these data. We basically have two ways of feeding data into SMW. The one way is we pump everything into an RDBMS, and they have adapters to Oracle, and then we just use their mapping tool to do the Sparkle queries. And then one other chain that we use is they hired a lot of the Mulgara developers. So a lot of the key developers of Mulgara are now Rebalytics people. So they want to use Mulgara as a triple store. And we're using Google Refine, which is from Treebase, right? And Needlebase as well, from, again, Google now, which is both Google. To basically, the dirty data is, you can massage the data using either Needlebase or Google Refine, and then we pump the RDF into Mulgera, and then basically it's just another Drupal store that we connected. So that's the vision. We took some shortcuts because of the tight application development timeline, but we're working on it. And hopefully, if we get buy-in from the Do It people next month when we pitch, we'll have the ability to execute them, and the funds to execute. Anything else? Thank you. Thank you for your time.